Sir, shall I start?
Okay, now I am making you host.
Okay,
When you
sir.
leave, at that time you make Khara as the host.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Yeah, now you can start.
Okay. All right. So today we are going to start with one other very important qualitative technique, that is grounded theory. More than a technique, I feel that it's a different approach altogether. The grounded theory approach is a different approach than the other methods which are there in qualitative research. Okay, and although the picture which you are seeing here is like literally grounded, I have tried to show that when we say grounded, it means that we are close to the ground. So in grounded theory also, this same metaphor can be used, because here again we we focus on this research which is grounded in the data, the actual data, the actual phenomena that has occurred. Okay, so that's why it is called grounded. So this research method is concerned with the generation of theory. Okay, the basic aim is to build a theory which is grounded in data that has been systematically collected and analyzed. So now a question might come that you might ask that, okay, so so all the different theories which are there, all the different methods which are there, they have the same focus. They want to build a theory which is grounded in data. What's so different about this particular method, right? See, the other different qualitative methods that we talk about are more into looking the different patterns within the data, and with some pre-assumptions, some theoretical assumptions, some theoretical basis is there, and that's how we are either building a theory, or we are trying to verify or prove a theory. Okay, if we are following the deductive logic like that. But in grounded theory, the main focus is on how we are collecting the data. I'll show you how each of the pieces of data which you'll be looking at, how the patterns or the themes are emerged, the codes are extracted from the raw data itself. Okay, and the main focus is on how you are collecting the data, how you are processing the data. Okay, and what are the different analysis technique which you are following for analyzing the data. Okay, so here the main focus is a lot on the data that we are dealing with. Okay, all right. So aims is to collect data and interpret the data from the textual base. Textual base can include the collection of field notes, video recordings, all these. Okay, after the process of interpreting, the database is categorized into different variables, and then the interrelationship between these variables are analyzed and studied. Okay, so all right. So what we are doing here is that the process of interpretation is a very important process here, where we are looking into the raw data and we are trying to find meaning in it. Okay, and then the database is categorized into different variables. Okay, the different variables which we are considering for our research, and then we are trying to see the relationships between these different variables. Okay, so that's how we do this entire analysis in um, grounded theory research. Okay. All right. So features of grounded theory: data collection and analysis occur simultaneously here. Okay, that's one of the distinguishing features of grounded theory research. Okay, so what happens here is that when we are collecting the data, we are doing the analysis simultaneously as and when we are moving ahead. What's the reason why do we do this? All right, so what happens here is that when we are doing something like this, it gives us a lot of flexibility to look into the data that we have collected and what else can we do about it. Okay, so what happens here is that suppose you are interviewing a number of people, right? So in the first interview, before starting the interview, maybe you have like 5 questions in place, right? Now, as you are proceeding, you are interviewing the first person. You felt that maybe 2-3 other questions you should be adding. All right, so that will be, that will be giving you a little more data about that particular phenomena. So you can go on and add it. Okay, this is the kind of flexibility which you will find in case of grounded theory research. Okay, so here we talk about something that is called the theoretical sampling. Okay, I'll discuss it in little more details in a short while. What is theoretical sampling? So once the data collection and analysis are done, then categories and analytic codes are developed from the data. I'll give you certain demonstrations how we can build analytic codes from the raw data itself. Okay. Then the theoretical sampling is used to refine categories. Okay. Theoretical sampling is a very interesting concept that we get in case of grounded theory research. All right. So this one actually indicates it's like reaching a stage where you are where you are saturated, where your data is already saturated. You have nothing more to extract. Okay, if that is the case, then you can say that I have reached the stage of theoretical sampling. All right, so here what happens is that as since here we are collecting data and analyzing it simultaneously, what happens is when we are collecting data as a researcher, we have to understand that whether I need more data to justify the research question or not. Okay, so you keep on collecting data as long as you feel this need. All right, and you can go on modifying your research method like that. You can be collecting data in some other modes as well. Okay, so these two processes are completely different in some other methods, but here these two processes go on in a parallel fashion. Okay, so you go on collecting data and analyzing it simultaneously until you reach a point where you feel that there is like a saturation that you have reached. Okay, as a point of saturation where anything that you are getting more is kind of the same thing. Okay, nothing new is coming out of it. So when you have reached that stage, okay, that means that you have reached that stage of theoretical sampling. So this theoretical sampling stage is used to refine categories. Why are we saying refining? Because here we since in grounded theory research, we are talking about categorizing the different variables. So you have to make sure that all the variables which you are considering, okay, you are reaching at the end of your data analysis process, all these should be absolutely separate among each other. They should not be overlapping among each other, right? So that you have to reach through refinements, okay, different types of refinements. So these refinements which actually actually help you to categorize these variables completely differently, okay, so that you have non-overlapping categories of variables from your research, okay. Abstract categories constructed inductively. Here the research logic is inductive. So you start with different, raw data. We start with raw data, then we try to find the patterns in the raw data. Then based on the patterns, we can develop themes, and then we talk about hypotheses, and then on the basis of those hypotheses and all, we develop the theory itself. So it's an inductive way of building the theory. All right. Social processes are discovered in the data. Okay. Since this is a very rich data source that we are considering for grounded theory research, we can develop. We can actually look into and understand the different types of social processes which are ingrained in the data itself. All right. Analytical memos used between coding and writing. So memoing is a very important process, a very important step, I would say, in grounded theory research. I will show you different types of memos that we use and what can we use as a memo in grounded theory research. So it's like something that bridges the gap between coding and writing. All right. Finally, these categories which emerge from the memoing and coding are, they are integrated into a theoretical framework. Okay, so that's how it works. So there are basically two different type of approaches in grounded theory research. The first one is the classic grounded theory, and this is, I would say the more popular one, more widely applicable one. So this approach is based on the work of Glesser and Strauss, and they emphasized the discovery of a theory that is grounded in data. Okay. Focus in classic grounded theory, the focus is on generating a theory that explains the phenomenon being studied, okay, without being influenced by preconceived notions or existing theories, right? So here we are differing a lot from different other qualitative approaches, right? Because here the focus is on generating the theory that explains the phenomena itself. And here we are not focusing on any other preconceived notions, pre-assumptions, existing theories. We do not consider any of those. All right. So the process involves a continuous cycle of data collection, coding, and analysis with the aim of developing categories and subcategories that are grounded in the data. Okay. So as I mentioned, these are all simultaneous processes, okay, parallel processes. These, continuous cycle of data collection. So you keep on collecting data over time, okay, and while you are collecting data, you are continuously coding the data and analyzing it, okay, and developing categories and subcategories which are grounded in the data, okay. The categories and subcategories are then compared and synthesized to generate a theory that explains the phenomenon. Okay, so here we are developing a theory which is explaining a phenomenon, but these are generated, this particular theory is generated on the basis of the categories and subcategories, which in turn we are developing from the different codes, okay, from the raw data. So that's the process of classic grounded theory approach, right? On the other hand, we have another approach that is the constructivist grounded theory approach. And here, this approach is based on the work of Sharma's, okay? And this emphasizes the role of the researcher in the process of theory development. Okay, role of researcher in the process of theory development. So the focus is on understanding how individuals construct meaning and interpret their experiences rather than on discovering an objective truth. Okay, so here in the constructivist grounded theory, we are talking about how individuals are constructing some meaning and interpreting their experiences. Right. So these here the focus is not on the specific type of data, the raw data which we have collected, but rather on how individuals are constructing meaning, okay, and interpreting their experiences. So this process involves a reflexive and iterative approach to data collection, coding and analysis, with the aim of developing categories that are grounded in the data and the researcher's interpretation of the data. So reflexive and iterative approach means we go on, it's like a continuous process of data collection until a point of saturation is reached. Okay, so iteration happens, number of iterations that we say in statistical modeling, it happens that we go on doing iterations where maybe the same analysis is run on the data for a number of times. Okay, maybe 8 times, 10 times, 25 times, 50 times, 100 times. Okay, until a point of saturation is reached when nothing more is emerging from that particular analysis. The same thing is coming over and over again. So that's what we call the process of iteration. Same thing you can think of in this case, in the constructivist grounded theory approach also. Here, an iterative approach is taken. So we go on collecting the same data from different individuals, coding and analyzing the data over and over again, until we reach a point where nothing new is coming out of it. Okay, and the categories are then compared and synthesized to generate a theory that accounts for multiple perspectives and interpretations of the phenomenon being studied. So here comes the difference between the two different approaches, right? In the classic grounded theory approach, we are using the categories and subcategories to explain that, to develop a theory that explains a phenomenon, right? But in constructivist grounded theory approach, we are generating a theory which is, not done to explain the theory itself, but to understand the multiple perspectives and interpretations of that phenomenon that exists. Okay, so how that particular phenomenon is perceived subjectively among different individuals, that's the focus in constructivist grounded theory. Right, so that's the difference between these two different approaches. But the classic grounded theory approach is a little more popular because it talks about a theory which is grounded in data and which is quite objective in its approach. All right. Okay. So carrying out a grounded theory, how can we do it? First, the idea of interest is identified. Okay, what are we interested into? What is that particular phenomena that we are interested into, right? So we identify a particular phenomenon on which we want to do the grounded theory research. Then we have to make sure that theoretical preconceptions are avoided. Although it is accepted, since this is difficult in practice. Okay, so sometimes it happens that such kind of preconceptions might be influencing our understanding of the process of the research, but as much as possible, it is important that we should be avoiding theoretical preconceptions in this case. Then analytical procedures and sampling strategies are then studied and used, and the study is finished when theoretical sampling is reached. Okay, I already explained what is theoretical sampling. Data collected may be qualitative or quantitative or a combination of both. Okay, so in grounded theory approach, we can be including textual data, we can be including video recordings, we can be including archival data, some list of certain events, etc., etc. All these things can be taken together to combined together to as our source of data in grounded theory research. Okay. Data collection methods often include in-depth interviews using open-ended questions. Okay, so this is when we will discuss interviews, then I'll discuss what different types of interview methods we can use in qualitative research. But here we are not focusing on semi-structured or structured interviews, but it's more of unstructured, in-depth interviews we are looking into, where we can have open-ended, we can use open-ended questions. These open-ended questions we should be using because the ultimate aim is to explore that phenomena as much as possible and to get as much as data, rich data from our data collection procedures. Questions can be adjusted as the theory emerges. So we have this flexibility of adjusting questions in grounded theory research because, we do the data collection and analysis simultaneously, right? So as you are going on analyzing the data, you might feel that, okay, maybe I can twitch a particular question here, or I can add some more question here. So that kind of modifications is allowed, okay, in grounded theory research. And observational methods and focus groups may also be used, okay. Theoretical sampling, as I mentioned, so this is a very important concept that Glesser and Strauss described in 1967. So they described a process of generating theory from data, which includes collecting the data, then coding and analyzing the data. Next, the researcher makes a conscious decision about what further detail they feel needs exploring as the new theory develops, okay? So that's why here lot of experiences of the researcher is required here. So that's because when you are collecting data as a researcher, you have to make a decision that what more you need to explore, okay, to develop a particular theory. Okay, so it usually takes place after some initial key concepts or categories have been identified. So as you are going for data collection procedure, what happens is you are analyzing the data simultaneously. So as you are analyzing, you are looking into the categories and subcategories at the same time. Okay, and when these categories and subcategories are emerging one by one, that might give you some insight about what more you need to explore. Okay, so then you make a conscious decision. For example, you might decide to interview patients about their experience of heart failure. So they may talk about systematic errors occurring in the general practice surgery, right? From this analysis of the data, you may decide to approach or interview general physicians to explore their views on patients' comments, right? Because that will give you a 360-degree evaluation of the entire phenomena which you are trying to explore, right? So you started at the beginning, at the initial point, you started with interviewing the patients only, okay? But when the patients are there talking about the errors that are occurring due to the some errors from the end of the physician, you might decide that, okay, I need to interview the physicians as well to understand this part, and whether such kind of errors do happen, or it's just the conceptions of some speculations of the patient. So you might explore this direction as well at a later stage. So that is allowed in grounded theory research, and that actually will help you to reach the point of theoretical sampling. So theoretical sampling, therefore, is used to produce more data to endorse or refute the categories that have been identified in the previous analysis. Okay, so whatever analysis you are doing, okay, you go on forming different categories, and as you are forming different categories, you might be developing this insight that, okay, I need some more data to verify or to reject these categories, or to build some more categories like that. And as you go on exploring it more and more, you feel that okay, maybe some other categories, already those categories which have been developed, these are not working well. So maybe I have to focus on some new categories, some new direction, like that. So that's the point of theoretical sampling. So this theoretical sampling is done to make sure that you have enough data for generating the theory which you are looking into. Okay, is that clear to everyone? Any question till here? Okay, so I think we can proceed. There is also the concept of theoretical sensitivity that we talk about in grounded theory research. Okay, what is this theoretical sensitivity? This refers to the insight of the researcher. Okay, it concerns the researcher being able to give meaning to data, understand what the data says, and being able to separate out what is relevant and what is not. Okay, that's theoretical sensitivity. So it's basically about the researcher. Okay, when the researcher is able to, is sensitive enough to give meaning to the data, understand or interpret the data, and is being able to separate out the data, what is relevant in the data and what is not relevant in the data, that part. Okay, so by being theoretically sensitive and using insight, the researcher is able to develop a theory that is grounded, theoretically dense, and cohesive. All right, so that is very important. It depends a lot on the experiences, professional and personal experiences of the researcher. Someone with very little experience might face difficulty in this particular stage. Okay, being able to find out what is relevant and what is not relevant, that is that depends a lot on the experiences of the researcher himself or herself. Okay, so sensitivity comes from several sources, including number one, the literature. So in-depth review of literature actually offers a rich understanding of the phenomena being studied. So if you have a very good understanding of what this phenomena is about, okay, then you'll be able to make sense of the data which you are getting, interpret the data, and be able to find out what is relevant and what is not relevant. Okay, so this literature review will actually help you a lot. Second is a professional and personal experiences. So this offers an understanding of the events and topics being explored. Okay, so this experience, as I mentioned, if a researcher is has a lot of experience in conducting a grounded theory research, then it becomes easier for him or her to understand the event or the topic which is being explored in a better way. And finally, the analytic process, okay, how you are analyzing the data, that is very important. So this one allows for the insight and understanding of the phenomena. So if you are going for continual analysis of the data and simultaneously, and you are trying to understand it as much as possible, then it will help you to develop certain insights from the data itself. Okay, so that's what we term theoretical sensitivity in grounded theory research. Okay. Data in grounded theory research. What kind of data can we consider? Not only interviews or observations, but anything is data that helps the researcher generate concepts from the emerging theory. So this can be field notes, which can come from informal interviews, lectures, seminars, expert group meetings, newspaper articles, etc. All these, okay, internet mail lists, even television shows, conversation with friends, etc. All these can be different sources of data in grounded theory research. Okay. So the steps in grounded theory research, what are the different steps that we can consider? Memoing. As I mentioned, memoing is actually one of the major, step in grounded theory research. So what are these memos? Memos are a form of short notes that the researcher writes and prepares. Okay. What kind of short note? These are not like, the notes that we take in the class, but these are connections between the incidents, codes, properties, and categories that we are looking into. Okay, so it can take any form. Actually, memos can take any form. They are informal logical notes about the data and the theoretical connections between categories. Some very personal notes which the researcher is making for himself or herself after the data is collected, okay, or when the data is being collected. Okay, the kind of connection which you are building between different events or different incidents, different phenomena that you are looking into. So these memos act as a source of data which is further put in other processes of analysis and interpretation. And memoing is a continuing activity which builds intellectual assets, fosters analytic momentum, and informs the grounded theory findings. Okay, so it's a very important step in grounded theory research, and right from the beginning of the research, the researcher goes on developing memos. Okay. Whatever be the mode of data collection, it can be interview, it can be observation, it can be taking some field notes, it can be considering some video recordings, some social media posts, whatever, some drawings, internet mailing list, whatever you consider. Okay, when you are looking into that data, you are taking notes for yourself. These notes focusing on the connections between the different events, different phenomena. Okay, and that you can use as a memo. All right, and it's a continual process. As you go on doing the research, memoing will continue. Okay, till the point you reach theoretical sampling and you are able to interpret the data as a whole. Okay. So styles and structures of memoing, well, there is no fixed style. Okay. A researcher can take any form, it can be informal, formal, conversational, can use his or her own autonomy of memos to develop research. Okay. However, the researcher, feels, best. Okay. Whatever be the form of the memo. So, as Sharma's mentions that it's the best way of memo writing is to do what works for you. So you can write one single word for understanding, you can write a sentence, you can form a paragraph, whatever you want. It is not necessary to check grammatical mistakes of memos. A memo has no approved structure. It may be long, it can be short. Format of memos actually vary from person to person. And memos might be anything from a couple of words to several paragraphs or pages. It is not critiqued or evaluated and has no perfection. So I guess, you can understand that this memo, these are kind of, notes which the researcher is taking for himself or herself, and that's why it can take any form. All right. Okay. There is, however, a kind of, informal structure which you can follow for your own convenience while taking memo. So there can be a heading of that memo, body of the memo, and certain attachments. Heading recognizes who wrote the memo and who it was sent to, the date, and the purpose of the memo. Okay. So, for example, when you are interviewing, suppose the first subject, okay, so you can give a heading like, okay, this is the number of the this is the name of the person, and this was it about, okay, the date on which the interview was being conducted, okay, and what was the purpose. So all these you can include in the heading part. The body provides a description of the purpose, such as important background information with some detail, specific recommended response. Okay, all these can include in the body of the memo. It can be included in the body of the memo. Okay, for your own convenience. A researcher can attach any documents in memo under the closing. Okay. As a beginner, as a grounded theorist, it is important that we should be following some informal structure of memoing, because otherwise it will be difficult at a later stage. It will be difficult to integrate the memos as a whole and form categories and subcategories. So when you are interviewing a lot of people or looking into a lot of different data sources, and you are generating thousands of memos from different data sources, then it can become difficult to integrate it at a later stage if you are not experienced enough. So at the initial stage, it is recommended that we can follow some informal structure for such kind of memo writing. Okay, in that way, later on it will be easier for us to integrate the writing or the memos together to form the categories and subcategories. Okay. But if one is a very experienced researcher, if you are if you have already done such kind of research beforehand, then you can go ahead and you can avoid making following structures and all. You can just write memos in a very short form and for your own convenience, and you can work with it. Okay, so preparing memos. There are different stages where we form memos. The first one is a theoretical note. So this form of note contains the details regarding how a textual database is related to the existing literature of the concerned study. Okay, so this existing literature which is there for understanding a particular phenomena, how the textual database is related to it. Regarding that, when you are forming memo, that constitutes a theoretical note. Okay, theoretical type of memo. Note consists of about 1 to 5 pages. Final theory and report consists of an integration of several such theoretical notes. Okay, if you look into published papers on grounded theory research, you will see that there are in such kind of literature, you will find that they have included such kind of theoretical notes, theoretical memo, while explaining a particular phenomena. Okay. Field note consists of the notes prepared when the researcher actively participates with the population or culture or the community under study. So it can be the observations of behaviors, interactions, events, or situations that occur on the spot. And it also contains the casual notes behind such actions. Okay, so when the researcher is actually present in the field, okay, interviewing a person or observing a person, observing a phenomena, there, when the kind of memo that the researcher is making constitutes the field note. Okay, and that can include everything. It can start with observation of a particular behavior. For example, in a clinical setting, when you are interviewing a patient, suppose. Okay, so we know that in a clinical setting, it's not just the verbal reporting that we rely on, whatever the patient is saying. It is important to us, but what the patient is not telling us is also very important to us. So, I'm sorry. So we look into the non-verbal aspects as well. Okay, the body language of the patient as well, right? So those are the things that will help us constitute the field note. So as a clinician, we can be taking notes about what is happening there. Okay, any particular change in the body language of the patient. Okay, interactions, how the patient is interacting with the caregiver. Okay, the events or situations that is happening there right at that point. Okay, and what we think about it. So taking such kind of field notes is very important, because later on, maybe at that point of time when you are sitting in front of the patient and you are trying to understand how the patient is interacting with the caregiver and all, you might get some insight that, okay, this is happening because of this. Probably something like this had happened, and that's why this had, that's why the patient is behaving like that. Okay, but at a later stage, you may not remember that. Okay, so that's why it is important to mention in the memo writing, it is important to mention why you think that that kind of behavior has taken place. Okay, so all these actually constitutes the field note, right? Code notes. The researcher or the ground theorist may also prepare notes by naming, labeling, or categorizing things, properties, and events. The code notes are those notes which discuss the codes of such labeling. Okay, so in grounded theory research also we do coding. Coding, we will discuss in details, in interview technique, when we will be discussing interview technique. But here also, I will discuss some parts of it. Okay, at least the basic things, the fundamentals of coding. So these code notes actually, they act as a source of information for final reports. Further, these code notes also acts as a guide to the ground theorists while analyzing a text or a case. Okay, so these codes are basically prepared by naming, labeling, or categorizing things. So we can be looking into pattern of data which are emerging, and we can be naming a particular phenomena which we are observing, okay, labeling certain themes, okay, which we find relevant, or we can be categorizing different events, things, etc. All right, so these codes at a later stage actually help us to develop the final report, right? Okay. Types of memo. Generally, there are three types of memo in qualitative research: research diary, methodological memo, and analytical memos. Okay. So what are these? Research diary, it's the primary memo and is used for reflections, thinking critically about the research. It also solicited the development of the research that comprises a varied set of data collection instruments and techniques. It clarifies the assumptions, personal responses, and decision making about the research. Okay, so basically, it's like the kind of memo that the researcher writes to himself or herself. All right, so it's not about the data which one is collecting. It's rather about the plan, the methodology, the process one is using for collecting the data. Okay, so in a research diary, what we will find more of very specific memos which will help the researcher to think about the research itself. So it's like a metadata about the research itself. Okay, how or why one should be considering a type of research, what should be the kind of method one should be considering. Okay, and think critically about the research itself. It can be including information about the development of the research. Okay, what kind of data one should be collecting, the instruments and the techniques one should be including. Okay, and the basic assumptions that we will be making, one researcher will be making about the process included. Okay, certain decision making about the research itself, all those things will be included in the research diary. So it's a valuable tool, prompting insights which formed a variety of methodological and theoretical decisions in relation to the research. It can be used to list and outline a strategic plan for the short-term and long-term development of ideas. So this actually include the memos written to the researcher himself or herself, okay, to develop a strategic plan for conducting the ground theory research, right? Second type is the methodological memo. So these are used to maintain the empirical value of qualitative research for the development of the conceptual framework, analytical processes, and theoretical approaches. Okay, so these are about the methodology to be used, right? The researcher can elaborate on how they collected data, analyzed the data, analyze which coding cycles they used, and how they identified relations between the codes. So these memo will help the researcher and others as well to evaluate the methodological process used in the grounded theory research itself. Okay, so these set of memos are about the methodology itself, the entire process of the grounded theory research that has been conducted. What kind of process, how the data was collected, how the data was analyzed, okay, what kind of codes were used, okay, the relations between the codes, all those things will be included in such kind of methodological memos. Okay. Finally, the analytical memos. These are brief notes about the thoughts, ideas, and questions which the researchers realize during the data gathering, coding, and data analysis process. So these are considered as simulation exercises and are comparable to journal entries, lab notebooks, and blogs. Okay, so basically these are about how the data is being collected as a whole and collected and analyzed as a whole. Okay, so these memos do talk about the different processes that the researcher might be using for analyzing the collected data. Specific codes, okay, the data analysis process, journal entries, lab notebooks, etc., blogs, these can be included as analytical memo. Naturally, these are written both during and after the data collection process. This can be used for expanding the in-depth analysis of the data and going beyond explicit descriptions that provide a strong starting point from to develop a draft analysis. Okay, so this type of analytical memos about the analytical process itself will help at a later stage, which will help to develop the building the theory, generating a theory with a very strong analytical background itself. Okay, so these are kind of the different types of memo which we can use in a grounded theory research. Okay. Use of memos. Memos can be used for different specific purposes, such as for the research diary, teamwork memo, idea memo for generating ideas, code memo for generating codes, theory and literature memo. So when you are going through the literature review process, you can be making certain memos for it. Research questions memo, building the research questions. For that also, you might be developing certain, you might be writing memo. Okay, so memos are based on coded data that can be used by both the novice and experienced researcher as a procedural and analytical strategy throughout the research process. Okay, so both novice and experienced researchers might be using these different types of memos for the entire research, for conducting the entire research process. Okay. So memo writing, memo makes comparison among the data, codes, and categories. It's a descriptive record of analytical discussion between the researcher and the data. Memo writing is happened when coding and continuous comparison run to identify possible patterns within the codes. It's the intermediate step between coding and writing the first draft of a manuscript. So memos can be written when a researcher decides to combine or split codes, when he or she wants to write conceptual notes about how the codes tell the storyline or the context in which the certain code could be applied. During the coding, memos can be written to identify possible patterns in and between the codes. Purpose of memo writing is for observing how the coding process and code choices takes shape in the research. So all these, in the entire process, you can understand memo writing is actually a very important step here. So I'll just show you some examples, then we will go back into the steps if we have time today. Otherwise, we will continue that in the next class. So I'll give you some examples here for your understanding. So consider this: the interviewer asking, suppose there is a question, what did you do before coming to Canada? Did you work? That's the question. Now the subject, Laura, is answering, no, women in our town did not work. Only those who really needed the money had their wives go out and work, or if they were widows. Otherwise, nobody worked outside the home. I had a brother-in-law who was from Abruzzi, who used to say that in my hometown, the women were all eaters of sweets, meaning did not work. That's the answer to that particular question, right? Now, the researcher is developing the memo, writing the memo. Laura explains how women's work outside the home, within quote, indicates a family's economic needs. women's paid work is taken as a social marker of low class and status. When women are not forced by necessity to do paid work, it indicates that the family is well-to-do. Laura's brother-in-law's term, eaters of sweets within quotes, suggests that the standards of living in her hometown are high because families can afford women to stay home and also to eat sweets. Here, the housewife is associated with luxury goods like sweets. Housewives, therefore, confer positive status on family. That's the interpretation in the form of a memo. Note also that neither Laura nor her brother-in-law consider housework as within quotes work. May explore how such a perception of the housewife contributes to women's personal identity. So this last line actually indicates that here you can you have a scope for including some more questions maybe to explore this perspective. Okay, whether what is the perception of such kind of housewives about work, housework as a work, what is the contribution of such kind of work to the women's personal identity. So we know that in many societies it happens that women who stay back at home and those who are doing work at home, they are not considered to be working at all. Okay, so we call them homemakers, right? So what that is the kind of perspective that we are considering in this case as well, or it is something else. So this last line actually is a memo, is like a note to the researcher himself or herself that I might consider this perspective as well. So maybe that will lead to more of theoretical sampling in this case. Okay, so that is an example of the memo that we can consider in this case. Okay. Okay, there are some many other examples as well, so we will discuss this as we go on. So I'll just discuss the stages of memo writing today and I'll stop there. So there are a number of stages. So initial memos are those which capture the exploration and development of qualitative codes and provide direction for future data collection. These are used to acquire knowledge and ideas during the exploration of participant perspectives. Researchers can use initial memoing during open coding to help conceptualize incidents and then follow theoretical memoing to transfer between substantive codes and theoretical codes. So that's about how you are considering the different types of codes in the process of analyzing the data, and how you can make sense of these different types of codes through your memo writing. Okay. In the advanced form of memo writing, here this type of memos actually identify, trace, or describe the supporting assumptions, emerging changes, and practical applications of categories throughout the data analysis. These are used to provide a space to freely write reflective thoughts, ask and answer questions, and identify gaps in the data. So as we just discussed the memo, the example of the memo that I discussed, in the last line, the researcher has written a memo for himself or herself that maybe we can explore this perspective. So that is a reflective thought of the researcher. Okay, identifying a gap in the data. So that's a gap, that might lead to some more exploration for reaching the theoretical sampling part. Okay, the stage of theoretical sampling. So integrated memos. With these memos, the researcher begins to integrate codes, categories, and prior memos to enhance the theory development. These are used to provide a space for theory abstraction and integration through drawings and discussions. So finally, when your memos are all written, you can be integrating all the memos, all the different types of memos together to enhance the theory development process. Okay, and this helps in the abstraction and integration of the theory by drawing and discussing the associations between these different memos together. So what is the importance of memoing? Memos actually can facilitate research teams. Okay, when generally grounded theories, they work in teams because it is very difficult for one single person to conduct the entire research and work with the all the different integrate the memos together. So they work in teams. So when they are working in teams, it is important that they are able to understand what the other person is perceiving or what the other researcher thinks about a particular data data collection process or the data that has been collected. So if you have proper memos written in place, then any of the team members can actually make sense of the memos which are included. Okay, and can integrate those memos for developing the theory. So Memo assists both the new and experienced researchers in making conceptual leaps from raw data to those abstractions that explain the research phenomena. By the use of memos, the researcher can capture the collected data and can explore the meanings of the data holds and also continuously maintain the freshness to conduct research. Without proper memoing, grounded theory researchers will be substandard. Okay, so memoing actually increases the sophistication of your research. When you are using proper memos and you have all these different types of memos in place, that gives an objectivity to the data collection procedure, analysis process, and to the integration of the memos in developing the theory as well. So without this memoing, this process of memoing, it might help the other researchers for a proper evaluation of the memoing process or the theory building process that we are talking about. Okay, so that's the importance of memoing itself. So I think our time is up, so I'll stop here today. And in the next class, I will discuss some more memoing examples, and I will also discuss some coding processes. Okay, and we will talk about the other different steps that we need to follow in grounded theory research. So if you have any specific question, please feel free to ask. Are there any questions?
No, ma'am.
It's clear. Okay, good. So we can continue this discussion in the next class. Thank you for your patient listening. So I'll take your leave then. Farha, I have made you the host, so
Okay,
you can close the meeting.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you,
Okay.
Varsha.